Magic in the morning, 8:35, makes us 25 minutes away from 9, and we're 19 degrees in town. We mentioned Mike Barrett would be joining us for this week's edition of Good Policies. Mike's on the road and continuing his education in the always changing insurance industry. Oh, we never stop learning, do we, Mike?
No, you never stop learning, and many people will tell you that I could use an education. So this is me trying to right the ship.
Well, you educate us in the mornings here on Tuesdays, and we were talking last week, Mike, about flood insurance and how FEMA and the government and all of that are interwound in it here. Let's touch on that as we start things off just a little bit.
Yeah, so last week, and I kid you not, and I had a feeling this would be the case, we talked about with the government shutdown how the National Flood Insurance Program was basically on pause. It was not re-upped, and now it is. About a half an hour after I got to the office last week, I got what I suspected would be coming, and that was an email notification from one of my Write Your Own National Flood Insurance Program flood carriers, confirming that the program was re-upped. And I believe, and I forwarded that email to you because I thought you might take interest in it. I believe it's only going to go until February 8th until it's up for a rediscussion. Yeah. So, it's one of those things that's always going to be in play because it's a nationally funded or government-funded program. So it can kind of fall under attack whenever the government has issues. And like I said in brief last week, that's why there is the existence now of these private flood insurance carriers who have, pardon the term, somewhat flooded the marketplace, but to try to answer some or address some of the pitfalls of the National Flood Insurance Program. And what are some of those pitfalls? Well, we talked about how people who were in high-risk flood zones essentially had a subsidized rate, meaning they weren't really paying what a true rate would be for having a property in what's considered a high-risk flood zone. So that's really kind of off to the program, and it's made for some pretty challenging and pricey policies. So these private carriers have come in, and where they really differ from the National Flood Insurance Program is while they certainly take into consideration the flood zone, if you're in the flood zone, it's not rated the same way. It's based on the 100-year flood maps. And unlike the National Flood Insurance Program, which accepts everybody, you just have to pay the price, these private insurance carriers actually will review every quote if we request them to, and they have the ability to deny or accept. So that means not necessarily everybody is going to be able to get a private insurance for flood, but those who may have a high rate or may not even have any eligibility for the National Flood Insurance Program certainly would be considered. And for that, we've written many people that way and saved them quite a bit of money in many cases, and certainly have met the needs of their mortgage, which, truth be told, most people get flood insurance for one reason and one reason only, and that's because their bank told them to. Not necessarily the best way to get into the flood program, but certainly a good way to protect your property. But if you're somebody who's concerned about risk and concerned about what could happen to your house, getting a flood insurance quote is a free thing to do. So certainly maybe something you should consider and test the marketplace out, see what your options are.
Well, Mike, I have a question here, and I want to make sure that I understand this correctly as I read this email that you forwarded to me.
Good, you're reading it. I didn't. I just forwarded it to you. Yeah. I didn't even pay attention to it.
You're in the industry. I'm not, so I got to read it. So the National Flood Insurance Program lapsed, okay, and it began again on January 20th, so that was 10 days ago. And if the government doesn't pass their funding to keep the government open after February 8th, does this mean that it will come up stopped again? Is that what that means?
It could. It very well could. And key to the point here is when there is an issue or when the National Flood Insurance Program lapses, it's not a question of whether you have coverage or not. It's a question as to whether somebody could get coverage written. They're not going to quote new policies when the flood insurance program is lapsed. It's not something that's going to be able to be done. But certainly, if you are covered, you will see a claim paid if it's lapsed and a loss occurs.
All right. So then, as we discussed last week, even if this gets put on pause again, somebody who is currently written, has a policy written that has the coverage will get covered, but you just can't assign a new account to a customer. Okay.
Yes, your policy is not going to cancel. Your coverage is not going to become null and void. But if you are somebody who's actively looking and working. Many people buying homes they will find through the process, because banks are looking at the risks of the property and may find that it's in a flood zone, may require flood insurance, and if the program's lapsed, the NFIP quote will not be something that you will be able to get while it's lapsed.
Well, obviously, there aren't a ton of folks that live in a floodplain around here, but there's a significant number, because I think if I remember, I'm trying to recall from last week's chat, there's portions of St. Johnsbury that are considered FEMA flood zones, right?
Yes. In fact, the entire town of St. Johnsbury is mapped by FEMA, as well as the towns of Libbyville. Waterford has had some mapping done as well, and some of the other towns like Barnet that participate have been mapped. And those maps are what's used to generate a rate for the National Flood Insurance Program. But again, the private insurance carriers do not necessarily take into full account those maps.
All right. So then another question: a business owner out there, are they available, or can they get national flood insurance coverage?
Commercial buildings, businesses are able to get National Flood Insurance Program policies. In fact, many do have them. And there are even some commercial properties that have the private insurance that we've been able to find for them over the years.
All right. So then, as we always mention when we chat good policies here, the only way to find out and the only way to get the absolute information is to give you a call or give their agent a call, right?
Absolutely. Check into it. Do your due diligence. It goes right back to being your own advocate. Make sure you're doing what you need to do and be prepared.
All right, Mike. Thanks an awful ton for, updating that with us. I appreciate you setting the information, and thanks for sharing it with us here today.
All right, and wish me luck while I get educated today.
Edumacated? Is that how you say it?
That's one way of putting it, sir.
All right, Mike. Well, you have fun. We look forward to next week's chat with good policies from Barrett Insurance, okay?
All right. Have a great week, Jeff.
All right. Thank you. Mike Barrett, Barrett Insurance Agency, here Tuesday mornings, part of the Magic Morning Crew. And we're going to keep going forward here. Oh, by the way, make sure you follow Barrett Insurance on YouTube, because all of our chats with Mike, we post up as soon as they're done. So coming up for you, music from David Guetta and Sia right here, Magic in the Morning.